Hi, this is Joe Mullings with The Other Side. Today, we've got Eyal Zimlichman, who is joining us from Tel Aviv. He is the Deputy Director and Chief Medical Officer and Chief Innovation Officer at Sheba Medical Center. So, Eyal, first of all, thank you for taking a break in your busy day and joining us on The Other Side.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You and I had a chance to meet each other last year under different circumstances at the official launch, although the public-facing launch of the ARC program that had already been, I guess, in the works for about 3.5 years. Can you share with the audience the importance of the ARC program and how it engages with Sheba?
Sure. So, it does seem like ages ago, right, with everything that's going on right now. ARC has basically come to be because we had an ambition. We had an ambition to have an impact, a clear and meaningful impact on how healthcare is going to be delivered in the future. We even set a goal. We've talked about 10 years from now, the year 2030. And we build this vision of how healthcare we think needs to look like. What are the challenges we're facing today that obviously seem to not work well? And what kind of solutions are we going to need? And then instead of just waiting passively for things to happen, we said we're going to be much more proactive in making sure we get to where we need to be. This is the whole concept of ARC. And it was clear to us we can't do this alone. It's not about one hospital. Sheba is the largest in the Middle East and, considered one of the best hospitals in the world. But still, nobody alone can do this, regardless of how big you are and how much research you're doing. It needs to take really an effort, a collaboration effort. It needs to be a network. It needs to be an ecosystem. And this is what ARC is. ARC is not about a hospital. ARC is about an ecosystem where different players come together, everybody sharing the same vision, and then working proactively towards getting that vision to be a reality. And this is what we launched. When you mentioned this at the end of November, just a few months ago. After building this, after recruiting the partners, after building this network, a global network, academic medical centers, leading industry partners, startup companies that come in as ARC members, governments. It's really, really a multinational global effort.
And you had, not to underplay it, we had representatives from Microsoft there. We had representatives from the venture community, from TriVentures. Peter Fitz was there. The mayor of Tel Aviv was there. The CEOs of the HMOs were there. So it's the HMOs, it's the venture people, it's the hospital, it's the technologists. I sat next to a number of people from the Boston Scientific Organization in the audience. So I think it's got to be understood that we're pursuing this digital health frontier as a team and not in a siloed scenario, which happens very often.
Right. And in that respect, ARC is really to understand what ARC is about. ARC is not just about the vision, but it's also about the strategy that we get us there. And for that, we've came up with 4 principles that govern ARC. The first one is focusing on digital health, understanding that if we're going to change healthcare, digital health is going to be the change vehicle that gets us there. And of course, that's what ARC is about. It's focusing on digital health, although doing some work on devices and pharma and diagnostics. But the real focus is digital health and the wide spectrum of that. And secondly, it's open innovation. It's working together with startup companies, building a startup-friendly environment, working together with the industry, providing access to our data and to our researchers and to our clinicians. It's really about us working together, not siloed, to bring whatever value we each have to the table. So that's the open innovation piece. The third principle is the international collaboration effort. And this is where, as I've said, 15 academic medical centers, really the leading ones in the world, mostly North America, but now we're expanding to others. And these would be medical centers like Stanford and Mayo Clinic and Mount Sinai in New York and Brigham and Women's and Mass General in Boston, Henry Ford, Thomas Jefferson, Cedars-Sinai, McGill in Montreal, and a couple of in Europe. So it's really, really a good group of academic medical centers. And together with that, the industry, the leading industry partners, you mentioned a few names, Microsoft, Boston Scientific, Janssen from the J&J Group, Merck, AstraZeneca, Allscripts, Baxter, Takeda from Japan. So really, really a multinational and multifaceted effort that is all leading towards one goal. And that's what's unique about it.
And has ARC pivoted now in order to take its superpowers, if you will, and I'll call them that, and aim them at the COVID-19 scenario right now. What have you done right now at Sheba on behalf of ARC?
Great question, because this is what's happening today. That's we all know the world changed. About a month ago, the world changed incredibly. I don't think it'll ever be the same again. And within that, we had to make a decision. And this was about 3-4 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago already, that we needed to make a decision. What do we do with ARC in these times of crisis? The government came out in Israel about a month ago and said, if you're not doing anything that's essential, you should stay at home. And it took us about 7 minutes to consider whether ARC is essential or not. And of course, we understood that it's not just essential, it's critical. And what we've done since is we've decided to focus ARC specifically on COVID-19. We've halted everything else that we didn't have to continue to push on. And we moved all of our focus to COVID-19. We even branded ourselves differently. It's now called ARC Battle Mode COVID-19. It's a battle mode. We work relentlessly now, days and nights, across time, on weekends, to come up with solutions that will have an impact tomorrow. The times have changed completely. It takes us to a week to come up with a new medical device and take it through regulation in Israel. It's this acceleration that only happens in times of emergency. I try to remind all of us that penicillin was invented in World War II because there was an urgency for that kind of solution. And so this is what we think COVID-19 presents. It's an opportunity for innovation to push forward on what is needed, not just for COVID-19, but what is also going to serve us for many, many years to come.
Can you give us some examples of how we are using this ARC and these ARC assets? And really, it's an ARC mindset. I don't even want to call it assets. And you use the word measuring whatever is measurable, and whether we're doing that digitally through video, tracking, tracing, engaging. What are some of the examples that are taking place right now within Sheba and that ecosystem?
So one of the first things we did, we were commissioned by the Ministry of Health in Israel to care for the Israelis that came from the Diamond Princess, the cruise ship off the coast of Japan, that people were infected with the virus. These were the first people with the virus that came into Israel, about 14 patients. And we were supposed to admit them into Sheba. We've built a facility just outside our main campus to hold the COVID-19 patients, a 40-bed facility. That was how we started. It's now grown to about 600 beds. But initially, that was the plan. And then we said, we want to try and minimize contact between the staff and patients. Because as you know, many of the staff contract the virus, they can get sick, and of course they can't work, and that's one of the problems we've seen in China, in Italy, and some other locations. And what we've tried to do in this facility is to maximize our experience with telemedicine. What we've implemented at the home of the patient, just a few months ago, we started implementing a hospital at home plan here in Israel, very heavily based on technology. We've taken that technology and deployed it inside our COVID-19 structure. And so we've had patients who were there, some of them very mildly ill, with very mild flu-like symptoms. We've had them under monitoring with different monitors, video cameras. We were communicating with them through the videos. We were treating them and examining them through the videos. We used technology like TytoCare to listen to the heart and lungs, even though there was no clinician in the room. We use a technology like EarlySense to make sure we can appreciate ahead of time when a patient was deteriorating and needed to be upgraded to an ICU environment. We've used technology like Datos, which is our platform to really collect all the data from Bluetooth technologies, measuring vital signs and other monitors to streamline all of that so our clinicians can actually make sense of the data. And so we have all this data that is already accumulating in the past months, collected on all of our COVID-19 patients. That is, for our perspective, measuring everything that's possible. We all know it's a new disease. We don't know how to make sense of it. It surprises us every day. And there's so much insights we still need to learn. Data will get us there. And that kind of data we're collecting on our patients was just made live this past Thursday, just a few days ago. We've uploaded it to the cloud and provided access to all the ARC members who want to work on the data and learn from the data to get those insights. So now we have about 19 groups already registered, signing a contract for confidentiality and working on the data of all the patients that have gone through Sheba. We still have not seen thousands. It might happen. We hope it won't. But we have so much data points for every patient coming in from all these sensors that we've been collecting. So that's, I think, has a possibility to come up with some solutions that would be game changers.
Why is it that Israel seems to be incredibly progressive in relative terms to the rest of the world in regards to data, surveillance, the ability to very quickly initiate and move in this type of fashion? What do you attribute that to?
So I think it's a couple of issues here. One is, and I think that's pretty common now to understand and agree that Israel can move very, very quickly in times of crisis. Maybe it's because we're more accustomed to it. Maybe it's because we have a plan for almost any catastrophe that can happen. But we can come up with a response that matches the magnitude of the crisis ahead of us. And that was the same here with COVID-19. We're cited on a couple of research groups that said that Israel was announced as #1 in terms of response to COVID-19 out of all the countries in the world. We've seen that already coming up, comparing different reactions of different countries. The fact that we have a large number of patients, but very low mortality rate in Israel for COVID-19, very low rate of patients who need ventilation, is in many times because of that good response. So part of the answer to your question is, it's part of the Israeli culture. We're responding well to crisis. We're responding quickly to crisis. We get together. We stop fighting because we do a lot of internal arguments on day to day. We stop that typically when it's times of emergency, which is a good trait. And we muster our resources together to get through this. That's on one end. On the other end is, of course, the innovation ecosystem that exists in Israel. The ability to come up with new ideas every day. On a typical week outside of COVID-19, I see every week on average 5 to 8 new startup companies I've never seen before. And it's a huge number of startup companies that circulate through the systems. Of course, not all of them are great, but just having that huge amount, obviously a nice chunk of them would be great solutions that could have an impact on the market. So bring these two together, the immense amount of innovation, the startup mentality that we have here, together with our ability to react very quickly and in a thoughtful process to times of crisis. And I think that's what you get as an opportunity to advance much of what we're doing on day to day.
You've been a champion, as well as I have, of the digital push in healthcare from one end to the other. Unfortunately, this crisis has impacted that in a positive way. So a silver lining on this cloud. Do you believe that to be the case? Do you think we'll ever go backwards?
No, I think you're 100% right. When I reflect back, I wrote an article back in 2006 titled "Telemedicine: Why the Delay?" And when I was giving talks about telemedicine up to about 4 or 5 months ago, I always brought up a slide with that article, and I said, "Listen, I could publish this article today, and it would still be relevant." And I think in a matter of a month and a half, we've started making a lot of advancement on telemedicine. We're starting to see, we had our telemedicine platform. We have a new platform we just finished building at the end of 19. Our plan was to get it across 50% of the Sheba system by the end of 2020. We got to 50% within a week inside COVID-19. So this type of adoption rate in healthcare, and you know how difficult it is to change habits in healthcare, this type of adoption would only be possible in a time like this, where people understand that there's no other alternatives. Your patients just, in many cases, can't walk out of their house and come and see you in the hospital. So you have to reach out to them. And that necessity, this is what we're going to see have the biggest impact on healthcare, the push of telemedicine. I was always talking on my talks about the next decade being a critical decade in how healthcare is going to be performed, and how telemedicine is going to get to a point by the end of the decade that 80% of medical encounters would be through video. I now think 80% of medical encounters would be through video by the end of 2020. So this is how this whole thing has been pushed, of course, in a positive way. I typically say, look at the half full glass. I can't say half full glass in COVID-19, So maybe we could compromise on a quarter full glass in that case. But there are some opportunities we need to embrace.
Yeah. So you're very unique in the healthcare industry. You are a chief medical officer at Sheba, and you're also a chief innovation officer. And that chief innovation officer, as you just pointed out, sometimes has to work against legacy thinking, which is typically part of a chief medical officer's responsibility in healthcare, because we know what works, and sometimes we have to take a chance through innovation to punt on what works and actually what is best for the future. Tell me about your philosophy on that.
So it's a great question. When my CEO, we had a new CEO that came into Sheba 3.5 years ago, and I was the chief medical officer. He asked me to take the position of chief innovation officer. At first I asked him, so you don't like what I'm doing as chief medical officer? He said, no, I'd like you to do both. So that was when it hit me. From that time, I sleep much less, obviously. But the upside to that is that we innovate where the pain points are. I think chief medical officers, and I was the chief quality officer here before, and my origins are quality and patient safety, on top of being an internal medicine physician, of course. We know where the problems lay. We know what wakes us up at night. When I wake up in the morning and the first thing I look at my phone and I see what harm happened to patients over the night. A patient fell and has a bleed in the brain. Another patient, we broke a tooth during anesthesia. Or, these are the things we live every day. This is where innovation has to kick in. And many times when you get these two things separated, you get innovation that doesn't answer for your real needs and your real needs that have no answers to. When you bring them together, that's our opportunity to make a big impact. So from my perspective, I might be the first one, I don't know, I've never checked this out, to be both a chief medical and chief innovation. But in the past 3 years, since I have this position, I've seen a couple of hospitals do that as well, maybe following our example. But I think it makes a lot of sense to connect the innovation to the real world. And these are the two hats that you need. The other good part to this is that, as you know, it's very difficult to get things to change inside a hospital. And there's a lot of politics that goes on. Many of the C-suite roles that have to talk with each other to make sure that we get everybody on board before we make a change. On many of the changes, it's very simple for me because I need my right side to talk my left side into doing it. So if I have a nice innovation on the innovation center and I want to bring it into the real world, it's much easier for me to do it because I also have my position in the hospital. So I think that's one of the opportunities for us to push innovation quicker at Sheba. And if you'll come, you'll see we have many AI solutions going on. We have many telemedicine platforms, as mentioned before. We have, sophisticated technology that was invented at Sheba, or some of the startups that work with us in ARC, that gets pushed and implemented very, very quickly. And that's, I think, is part of the upside of doing these two roles.
It's a very unique model in Israel. I've been there many times. And if you've been in the healthcare industry, in the med tech industry, in biotech, you need to get there and spend a few days in Herzliya, spend some time in Caesarea, spend some time in Tel Aviv, and understand that I think Israel is doing it as well as any country in regards to pushing the future of med tech forward. Again, I'm obviously a big fan, but for reason. And I appreciate your initiatives there at Sheba and with ARC. Anything else, Eyal, before we head out that you would like to mention in regards to the current COVID situation and in general to our medtech leaders around the world?
Well, I think, again, we've been doing a lot of work with COVID-19, not just on telemedicine, not just on digital health. For example, looking for alternative ways for ventilation. As we know, there's a crisis around ventilation machines and protective materials and so on. So we really pushed ahead on many, many fronts, expanding all the way to diagnostics and pharma even within ARC. And I think, the other thing is that, again, in times of crisis, we have to work together. So we have been working with our partners in the US, in Canada, in Europe, pushing our solutions out to them, learning from them what they are doing that works. It's not just about working together internally in Israel that works very well. We have to take it to the next level. And we see this now more than we've seen it in crisis in the past, because communication is much easier, because this is a global world now. Everybody is doing things together. ARC has an immense capability to to have a lasting impact in COVID-19 and generally on healthcare as we move to the next few years. For example, we've worked with a couple of the state agencies in New York and the ministry and the departments of health in a couple of states in the U.S. to come up with some of our solutions and bring them over to the U.S. So it's really about working together, looking for the challenges, finding solutions, and that kind of capability to do that. I think ARC is very well positioned to really make the most out of it.
And again, it's very indicative of how medtech and healthcare in general really is borderless, I think more than any other industry. So I applaud you and your team for assisting worldwide with that. Yeah, listen, stay safe, my friend. I will see you when I can get back to Israel sometime this year. And thank you for your generosity and sharing everything with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for this time, and looking forward to see you in person soon.
Yes. This has been Joe Mullings with The Other Side.